Right now, you probably know exactly where your next meal is coming from. There's food somewhere nearby, a store, a restaurant, a delivery app sitting in your pocket. You know where you'll sleep tonight. You know what you'll be doing tomorrow morning. Take all of that away. No job, no paycheck, no grocery store, no calendar, no alarm clock, no permanent address. Just you, a few dozen people, in a world where finding food is your responsibility every single day. That used to be normal, not for a few generations, for almost all of human history. And somehow, the people living that way survived long enough to become your ancestors. Which raises a strange question. What exactly did they do all day? Most people imagine constant survival, a never-ending cycle of hunting, gathering, and barely avoiding death. But the evidence suggests something much stranger. Some hunter-gatherers may have worked fewer hours than many modern office workers. In the 1960s, researchers studying the Juhwansi people of southern Africa found that adults often spent around 15 to 20 hours per week getting food. Per week, not per day. That doesn't mean life was easy. A bad season could still be disastrous. But it does mean that ancient humans weren't spending every waking moment scrambling for survival. So what filled the rest of the day? A surprising amount of talking. Human beings are built for conversation. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies consistently find people spending hours sharing stories, teaching skills, joking, arguing, gossiping, and maintaining relationships. That wasn't wasted time. It was one of the most important things they did. Because before books, before schools, before the internet, information lived inside other people. If you wanted to know where animals migrated, which berries were poisonous, or how to survive winter, you needed someone to tell you. And this is the part most people never think about. For most of history, your grandparents were a storage device, a really important one. But they had a problem. Knowledge disappears when people die. Today, if an expert dies, their information usually survives somewhere. Ancient humans didn't have that luxury, which meant they became obsessed with memory. Some indigenous Australian songlines preserved detailed geographic information across enormous distances. By memorizing stories and songs, people could navigate landscapes they had never personally seen. No maps, no signs, no GPS, just memory. And somehow it worked. But that's not the most interesting part. Children weren't spending their days preparing for adulthood. They were already participating in it. A 6-year-old might gather edible plants. A 10-year-old could help track animals. Teenagers often joined hunting parties or cared for younger children. There was no sharp line separating childhood from adulthood. Learning happened continuously. You watched, you copied, you practiced. Then one day, without realizing it, you knew how to do it yourself. Anthropologists call this observational learning. Ancient humans called it normal. Which brings up an obvious question. If people weren't working all day, were they just sitting around? Sometimes. And that's actually more important than it sounds. Many hunter-gatherer groups spent long periods resting whenever resources were plentiful. People talked, repaired tools, made clothing, played games, sang songs, and simply existed together. The modern idea that every moment should be productive would have seemed strange, because productivity wasn't the goal. Survival was, and those aren't always the same thing. Here's where it gets strange. Some of the things ancient humans spent time on seem completely unnecessary. Around 40,000 years ago, people in Europe were carving musical instruments out of bird bones and mammoth ivory. Think about that for a second. Ice Age humans looked at a world filled with predators, harsh winters, and uncertainty, and decided they also needed music. Not later, not after civilization, not after cities. Before all of that. Music came first, which suggests something interesting. The things that make us human today may have been important much earlier than we usually assume. And this is the part nobody teaches you. Ancient humans traveled a lot. Not explorers, almost everyone. Archaeologists have discovered shells, pigments, stone tools, and decorative objects transported hundreds of miles from where they originated. Some trade networks existed tens of thousands of years before the first cities appeared. A shell collected near a coastline might eventually end up deep inland, passing through many different groups along the way. Humans were connected long before roads existed. The world was bigger than people imagined. But it was also smaller, because people knew each other. That worked until winter arrived. For much of human history, surviving cold seasons was one of the biggest challenges people faced. And humans developed surprisingly clever solutions. At sites in present-day Ukraine, dating back roughly 15,000 years, archaeologists discovered shelters built partly from mammoth bones. Actual mammoth bones. The remains of dozens of animals arranged into structures large enough for families.
Not caves, not temporary camps, homes. People were building architecture out of extinct giants. And somehow, that's a real sentence. But winter wasn't their only problem. Food doesn't wait. Animals move. Plants appear and disappear with the seasons. Which meant ancient humans spent much of their lives paying attention. A level of attention that would seem almost impossible today. Expert trackers can identify species, direction, speed, age, injuries, and sometimes even behavior from footprints alone. Many traditional tracking cultures developed these skills over thousands of years. A broken twig, a disturbed stone, a faint mark in the dirt. To most of us, that's nothing. To them, it was information. The landscape wasn't scenery. It was a conversation. And humans became remarkably good at listening, which helps explain one of the biggest misconceptions about life before jobs. People often imagine ancient humans as primitive, but primitive compared to what? Most modern people would struggle to find clean water in an unfamiliar wilderness. Many couldn't identify edible plants. Few could build shelter without manufactured materials. Your ancestors could. They carried entire survival systems inside their heads. Not because they were smarter, because they had to be. Every generation inherited knowledge refined over thousands of years, and then added a little more before passing it on. That's what most of human history looked like. Not factories, not offices, not careers.
People gathering food, sharing information, raising children, maintaining relationships, making tools, telling stories, creating music, solving problems, and preparing for whatever came next. All without separating those things into different parts of life. There were no job titles, no resumes, no retirement plans, just life itself.
And that's the strange thing. If one of your ancestors from 20,000 years ago could see you today, your smartphone would probably seem impossible. Your car would seem impossible. Your city would seem impossible. But after the shock wore off, they would probably recognize most of your day. You still gather resources. You still trade information. You still tell stories. You still spend hours talking to people you care about. The biggest difference is that somewhere along the way, we started calling those things different jobs. For most of human history, they were all the same thing. They were simply what people did all day.